Well, I'm delighted to introduce. Well, he doesn't need an introduction really, but this is Sir Ian Livingstone is in the house. Hello, Ian. How are you today?
Good morning. All right. I'm fine. Thanks, Ollie.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to International Game Book Day. And obviously, you got goodness me. This is your study you're in at the moment because I'm just looking
Yeah, I
behind you.
mean, this is where I do most of my work. Some people surround themselves with books. I mean, obviously, I've got quite a few Final Fantasy books in here, but I've also got 1,500 board games or more. I've kind of lost count now. So I take my comfort and inspiration from my games and my books in this room.
And what percentage would you say you've played of them?
I would say probably played two-thirds of them. I mean, you don't read every book you buy, but it still gives you a sort of thinking I will one day, and
Yeah.
that's how I treat my games. But they've all got something good about them in terms of mechanic or historical importance. So I don't just buy them for having the largest number. Each one has something of value, and sometimes I have to cull some of the ones that lost their value and find some space for some new ones because there's incredible amounts of board games coming out these days and some fantastic mechanics and yeah, it's kind of a real born again industry, which is brilliant.
It is amazing. I've also seen the boxes seem to be getting bigger as well. I think
Yeah,
some of these role playing games, they have the huge box and then they have another load more expansion boxes. So, but who do you
and the
play them with?
components are incredible, aren't they? Like you can get made. Obviously,
Yeah,
a lot of those are made in China, but the amount of bits that get you excited, which never used to appear in the old days, were just kind of a board with a few cardboard counters, and that was
yeah.
it. But now, amazing components.
And who do you play your games with?
I've been running the Games Nightclub, which is kind of a spoof gentleman's club since the 80s. I'm the proud secretary of the Games Nightclub. I publish a newsletter after every meeting, and we keep a record of every game played and score points. At the end of the year, we tally up the points, and the winner is given the cup, which is engraved with their name. So I've now published 636 issues of the Games Night newsletter with a circulation of six, and it's in the last year it's come down to five
Oh
because
wow.
we still got all the original members, and they are Steve Jackson, no surprise there, Peter Molyneux, who's pretty well known video games developer, designer. He created, amongst others, Fable and Black and White and Populous and Theme Park, and two guys who are not in the games industry, but we've been friends for a long old time. So of course the newsletter just pokes fun at them and ridicules them and tries to say that I'm the best player. So that's
Now, this is we've obviously moved International Game Book Day into October because there's so many horror game books out there, and your books, although predominantly fantasy, have for me always had a horror connection. Certainly on the covers. I mean, the 40th anniversary of City of Thieves has Zola Bones on the front, and that is horror, isn't it? So, did you have you got a love of horror? Um, Firstly,
well, I like monsters that are going to threaten readers. I want them to not feel comfortable as they encounter them. I want them to feel squirmy and feel that they're about to have their faces ripped off by a savage beast. And the more horrific they are, the more formidable the opponent would appear to be. And I think the more readers enjoy it.
yeah. And did you have any problems when you had the covers because they were quite horrific and the monsters were quite
Yeah.
sort of graphic initially?
Well, yes. I mean, it was quite a battle. I mean, you probably know the story of how Final Fantasy came about.
Mm.
We've been running games workshops since 1975. So that's Steve and I, and we used to run Games Days. And in Games Day 79, we met an editor from Puffin, Geraldine Cook, who was absolutely bowled over by the enthusiasm that people were playing Dungeons and Dragons and other role playing games at Games Day. And she asked Steve and I if we'd write a book about the hobby of role playing. And we said, well, rather than write a book about it, why don't we write a book that allows you to experience it? without really knowing what we were talking about.
Mm.
And she said, that sounds like a great idea. And Steve and I went back and came up with a synopsis for a concept which we entitled The Magic Quest, which was a branching narrative book replacing the Dungeon Master and a game system attached to replicate a very basic role-playing element to that. And Penguin Books were not interested at all. Geraldine told us that the managing director laughed so hard he almost banged his head on the table. The idea of an interactive book could possibly be appealing to anybody. Everybody only wanted linear books. But she really fought our corner. And while she wasn't able to get it into the Penguin imprint, convinced that Puffin ran that this was a great idea for kind of 9, 10, 11-year-old children. And so thus we went away and wrote what became The Warlock of High Top Mountain, which came out in August '82. So it took quite a long time between that first meeting and the game book coming out. But we also had to convince Puffin, which was a children's imprint, that we know better than them what readers would want in terms of artwork. And that took a lot of persuading because they wanted to keep it quite safe. So their suggestions were really like effectively a cover with a little gnome in a nice little green suit sitting on a mushroom with butterflies around and a sleepy frog with a bowl in its mouth.
And we how different it would have turned out if you'd gone that way.
We wanted this hideous creature that was going to make the reader kind of compelled and frightened at the same time to want to actually enter our world of Warlock of High Top Mountain. And to their credit, they did allow us to use the same sort of art that we'd been using for years successfully at Games Workshop in White Dwarf and in our role-playing games. So we won that argument, and thus it turned out to be a great thing. And they understood then that children actually weren't scared by it. It was thrilling for them. They got excited by it, and they could compartmentalize fantasy from reality, and it just added to the fun.
So totally. I mean, the covers that really got me was Forest of Doom. You know, that kind of creature. And I remember seeing that against all the other books in the children's section. Just go, whoa! I've got to pick it up and read it.
Well, that's
thrilling, lasting impressions.
I was very lucky to know Ian McCaig at that time. I had commissioned him previously to first design the logo for our carrier bag at Games Workshop, and he did some other artwork for us. And then I said, would you be interested in doing the first Final Fantasy book that I wrote on my own following Warlock, which was Forest of Doom? And he said yes. And so I gave him a very pretty basic description what I wanted. This is sort of this transformation of this goblin into this spiked hideous creature, and I had no idea what he'd come up with. And then you see it and you think, wow, the movement, the threat, the drama, the kind of what's going on there is so intriguing and kind of spellbinding that you can't help but want to open that book. And so of course I asked him to do as many covers as possible, so he went on to do City of Thieves, Lizard King, and Death Trap Dungeon, each cover being an incredible achievement. And you might notice that on City of Thieves, the Sambar bone with the spiked cranium could be first an influence for his own later work when he worked for George Lucas and created Darth Maul. They both got spiked 100%, and obviously distant cousins.
Yeah. And did you, I mean, obviously you said the publisher were fine, but did you have any groups, outrageous groups going, you can't put that on the cover and sell it to children? Or did it not really affect you?
Oh, the establishment and parents weren't just worried about the art, they were worried about the books. The Evangelical Alliance published an 8-page warning guide about them, saying that because you're interacting with ghouls and demons, you're just bound to get possessed by the devil. A worried housewife in deepest suburbia phoned her local radio station and said, having read one of my books, a child levitated. Of course, kids think, well, for £1.50 I can fly, I'll have some of that. The local vicar near Penguin Books threatened to chain himself to the railings of outside Penguin Books until the books were banned. There were petitions sent in, there was magazine articles warning of children using their imaginations too much. I mean, God forbid children using their imaginations. That what a terrible thing that might be.
Yeah.
And but over time, teachers particularly were understood the actual value of Fighting Fancy, and that it's great for reluctant
Mm.
readers. Just reading short paragraphs and making a choice, and that choice was empowering. It gave the reader agency and participation, and being part of something is a lot more compelling than just being a passive recipient of that content. And so they started to sell slowly at first, but then gather momentum as children. The word, the playground power of word of mouth was amazing, and suddenly this network of schools linked up and became a national craze. And Penguin still couldn't get their heads around the fact that this was actually selling, and ended up reprinting it, I think, 10 times in the first 2 months, until
Yeah.
Geraldine triumphantly came on the phone and said, "We've done it. Can we have two more, please?"
Brilliant. That's amazing. And you've obviously got a lot of collection of games behind you. Any of those horror games? Since we're in Halloween, have you got any favourites? Um, or I think you said mostly historical, but I'm sure you've got a few horror games.
Well, they're
Do you
not
have?
historical. They're strongly themed games,
Yeah.
trading games, and train games, and adventure games. I don't really know. I'm looking around the shelves now. I can't really see any specific horror games, but horror is certainly part of my um, way of writing.
Yeah.
Interactive.
Any kind of film influences? Where did you?
Well, I used to
Were you
watch
a
a lot of.
Hammer horror fan? Or?
I was a Hammer fan in my youth. I mean, looking back at them now, they were pretty awful, but they were great at the time. And I
Yeah.
used to watch a lot of horror films in my youth. I don't watch them now. I don't know. I don't enjoy that.
I'm just wondering where the influences came for the horror parts of your books. Is
Well,
that
I don't think they're overly horrific, but they've got some horrific monsters. I try
yeah?
and have as much kind of fantasy realm
I think
aesthetic in the
the
background.
Blood Beast is a incredible horror creation. You know, I mean, I remember reading that as a child and getting completely grossed out by it. So
Yeah, well, I guess
is that maybe that's just you,
there's
Ian?
horrific.
It comes from somewhere within. That
Yeah.
is.
I think it's just nice to get a little mini scare for kids and think this is a terrible
Yeah.
thing I'm confronted with. How am I going to defeat it? And of course, you know, killing the blood beast was not an easy thing to do, which was, of
Yeah.
course, my intention. What I like doing in Fighting Fancy game books is leading people to their doom with rose petals along the path, and making sure they ignore the correct path.
Fantastic. No, you did write a pure horror one with Blood of the
Yeah,
Zombies.
it.
Is that I think is that the only horror one you wrote?
Yeah, I've stuck to fantasy most of the time. So apart from Blood of the Zombies and Freeway Fighter, which is kind of post-apocalyptic dystopian survival thing in cars,
Yeah.
I have really stuck most of my game books inside kind of Northwest Alancia, and I like that kind of connected world and referencing other parts of Alancia, and the characters and the geography and the whole history is connected, and I enjoy that, being in part of that world, and building that world over time with additional game books. But as you say, I did step outside briefly with Blood of the Zombies. The reason that came about is when we sold out of Games Workshop, I moved into video games and became
Mm.
chairman of IDOS PLC. We launched Tomb Raider and Deus Ex and Hitman and Just Cause and a number of other titles. And there was quite a few horror games around, but there's an awful lot of zombie games around, and they were all very, very popular. Zombies somehow been really one of the main monsters in most video games. And of course, then The Walking
Mm.
Dead came out subsequently. But when I wrote Blood of the Zombies, I think I was really influenced by video game zombies, and I thought, well, I haven't really had many zombies in my book, so let's go full on with a book about
Yeah.
zombies, not much else.
And did you enjoy it? Do you
I
think it
did.
went well, or do you?
Moving into contemporary times, I don't think I'm as comfortable in modern day as I am in Alancia. That
Yeah.
worlds of magic and monsters where you can just let your imagination rip and create content that doesn't have to be particularly logical. Or I mean, you can do anything in a fantasy world, and it's, finding treasure and killing exotic monsters and magic and alchemy and elemental stuff, all sorts of crazy
Yeah.
stuff in a fantasy world, but you're kind of structured in a modern day environment. But I quite enjoyed it. I know, of course, let's be honest about it. It wasn't my best book by a long way, but I still enjoyed
Yeah.
doing it. I mean, you could argue that it got a bit repetitive, killing zombie after zombie after zombie, but I quite enjoyed it as a puzzle. If you just think about it in
Yeah.
terms of trying to find every zombie, that's not easy to do. It's very difficult. And of course, it was probably too hard. You needed about 500 stamina points to survive. But let's not worry
Yeah.
about
More
that, because
more
I
than
know
five fingers as well.
everybody cheats anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I don't know how many people actually managed to kill all the zombies, but I quite enjoy doing it, I must say. And it had some fantastic art. They're covered
Yeah.
by Greg Staples, and the internal art by Kev Crossley was really, really, really excellent. And of course, it celebrated the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy. So there was a lot going on when
Wow.
it came out.
Are you currently writing one at the moment?
Well, whenever I hand in a book these days, let's be honest about it. I'm hardly a young aspiring author. I'm now 73 years old. And I always think, well, that's it now, because doing it is quite not a gruesome, it's still enjoyable, but it's still hard
Yeah.
work trying to come up with something that's not going to be panned for being repetitive of something that happened previously. You already wrote that in that book, that did I can't even remember. so so trying to have come up with fresh ideas is gets more and more of a task and an ask. But so when I handed in and had published Shadow of the Giants, I was very pleased with that, because I thought that was kind of back to some of my best writing was in
Yeah.
Shadow of the Giants. So they think, am I going to risk my reputation again with a media book, or just go out quick while you're ahead? But of course, as people keep reminding me, it's the 40th anniversary of Death Trap Dungeon next year.
Yeah.
So obviously that's like a little irritant in my ear, and people goaded me to do some sort of sequel, prequel, whatever that might be, to Death Trap. I mean, it's
Well,
a hit
you've done that
story.
before. You've got two kind of linked to
Yeah, I
it
had
there,
Trial
haven't
of
you?
Champions, which was uh, definitely connected to Death Trap, and there was Armies of Death that was loosely connected to Death Trap.
Yes.
So I'm just messing around with ideas now. I haven't committed. I haven't told Scholastic. I haven't done anything other than be reminded by constantly that it's the 40th anniversary and what you're going to do about
Yeah.
it.
Do you think you could write it there quickly? How long did it take you to do one of the
Well,
books?
these days it takes me about 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
In the heyday, goodness knows how I did it, but it would take 2 months. And that was at
Wow.
Running Games Workshop at the same time. So Running Games Workshop during the day, going to our respective homes and writing Fighting Fancy books to like 2 in the morning.
Good. God.
And that was quite. I just don't know how you do it. You don't realize how much energy you have when you're young until you get old. Look back and say, "How did I do that?" You did
Yeah.
somehow. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility. Put it that way.
Well, there we go. You heard it here first, possibly. And well, even more pressure now. You've just announced that.
And of course, it's Fighting Fantasy Fest 5 next year in September.
Mm,
So it's always nice to
yeah.
have something out for that. But what I am writing with is in conjunction with Jonathan Green is Magic Realms, the history of the art and the artists of fighting fantasy. So
Oh, fantastic.
that's been pretty good fun, and sourcing all the art and yeah, because people always, as you say, marvel at the art of fighting fantasy. So we thought we'd do a full book. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but back in the Penguin days, there was the fancy art book, the large scale
Yeah.
book of some of the covers and some of the original art that was put in that book, and that's always been a highly collected item. And it's being published by Unbound again, and it's kind of like a follow-up to Dice Man that did really well, which was
Oh,
the
brilliant.
origin story of Games Workshop. So they're delighted. So people can pledge through the Unbound website to sign up for Magic Realms should they so wish to see some of the amazing art that's been published over the past 40 odd years.
Fantastic. And I've also got to congratulate you on the Livingstone Academy, which did it fully open this week, or is it down in
It
Bournemouth?
opened, well, it's actually been open in temporary accommodation for 2 years. So it's now in its third year. It's a state school, part of Academy's Trust, which I sit on the board, and it's the Livingstone Academy Bournemouth. But we officially opened the new building, which was a new capital project funded by government, a 38 million pound building complex, and it's an all through school, so from reception through to secondary through to sixth form. So ultimately there'll be 1,500 children in the school, and it's going to be focusing on digital creativity, a good arts education, joining up the left
Yeah.
side and the right side of the brain, giving kids skills as well as qualifications and know-how as well as knowledge. It's allowing them to participate through projects and teamwork to just allow their natural curiosity to give them kind of lots of diverse thinking in solving problems. So a lot of problem solving. There'll be elements of games-based learning, just taking the learnings from how Fighting Fantasy got children reading in the 80s, got a whole generation of children reading in the 80s, and how video games, if people can part their prejudice against one or two titles that children shouldn't be playing anyway, and think
Mm.
cognitively what's happening when you're playing a game, the problem solving, the intuitive learning, being able to fail in a safe environment, not being punished for making a mistake, encouraged to try again, the creative component, games like Minecraft, where a child can learn by applying the heat of a furnace to silica sand. They can make glass and take that glass and put it in their environments. Um, for some video games, effectively a management simulation. If you play Roller Coaster Tycoon, um, you're running theme parks, that you understand the physics of building
Yeah.
the rides, the management of staffing the rides and the park, and the economy of pricing and funding the rides. So it's an environment where if you get it right, great. If you don't, you're not judged a loser like you are in an exam. You
Yeah.
mess around with the parameters until over time everyone can be a winner. So there's a lot of elements of games-based learning that can be applied in a multidisciplinary, cross-curricular education. I think
And things are changing
that's
so much in the industry and the creative. Obviously, AI is a huge moving force at the moment.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on AI in the creative industries?
Well, and I think that what we have to worry about is, in some aspects, is robots and AI. So that's why the school is focused on creativity, because that's what differentiates it from the robots. No point in training like robots because you won't be able to compete with the real thing. So let's focus on our creativity. But AI, I think, is kind of a double-edged sword. It's a threat and opportunity at the same time. I think a lot of
Mm.
work will be enhanced and improve the output of lots of businesses because of the capacity and can generate content. At the same
Mm.
time, you've got to make sure that intellectual property is protected for the original creators.
Mm.
So it should be used as a tool. I don't think it's ever going to replace original content in the way that humans can create, but it can certainly supplement that, kind of do not the grunt
Mm.
work, but a lot of you know filling in the gaps, I guess you could put it, as to maintain output at speed. in scale.
Yeah, it seems to be moving very quickly. And finally, have you got anything that you'd like to kind of promote? Anything you're doing at the moment which you can reveal to us? Any other?
Well, I wear many hats. Yeah, my call it a day job. I'm a partner in a venture capital fund. I mean, obviously too old to run stuff anymore, but I never want to retire from the games industry. So I'm a partner, one of three partners in a fund that invests in video game studios, technologies, connected fitness and wellness, anything that throws off data that can be monetized. So that's what you call a proper job, but I still enjoy writing, saying writing Magic Realms, and I might write another Fighting Fantasy book. Who
Well, there
knows?
we go.
And
Let's almost end on that then.
and
Because
and and I sit on a lot of not-for-profit boards, National Citizen Service, the Federation for Education, Raspberry Pi organization, and there's a whole stuff I do trying to do my bit. So
fantastic. Okay, so it's the sequel to Death Trap Dungeon coming out next year for the so we look forward to seeing that.
you might think that I couldn't possibly comment.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
My
Thank you again
pleasure.
from everyone, and I'm sure you have lots of comments
Yeah.
in the
May
side
your
there. Thank you
stamina
again,
never
Ian.
fail.
Thank you. There we go.